morning, and welcome to the Pitt County Board of Commissioners meeting this morning. Those of you in the audience and those of you by way of television or other social media, welcome. Commissioner Mark Owens and Commissioner Glenn Webb was unable to be here due to some previous obligations, so
we both have court proceedings, separate court proceedings this morning they could not get out of and are not able to attend.
I guess I'd like to call the meeting to order at this time, and at this time, could we just have someone make a motion to excuse both?
I make a motion that we excuse Owens and Webb. Thank you.
Both of them.
Move and properly second that we excuse Commissioner Webb and our chairman, Commissioner Owens. Those in favor of the said motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those motion carry. At this time, we have roll call. All those are here, please raise your hand. Thank you. And now, the invocation by Commissioner Foley and the pledge by Commissioner Garris.
Almighty and merciful Father, we humbly beseech Thee to watch over us as we do the people's business this morning. Please guide us with your invisible hands so we may find favor in the decisions that we reach this morning. Please bless us with your grace through Jesus Christ, our only mediator and advocate. Amen.
Let's face the flag, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's time to have a motion on approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the revised agenda.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, if I can note, we have removed the second reading of the Adjourn ordinance on that. I think we're going to address that later on under manager's comments.
Okay, very good. Has been moved and properly seconded.
Does that not then, never mind, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Has been moved and properly seconded. We approve the revised agenda. Those in favor of the said motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, public address to the board. Do we have any?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have one person signed up for public addresses, Joe Cox. If he'll come forward and give his name and address, please. And if the attorney will read the statement for public addresses.
Yes, Pitt County welcomes comments on all matters of public concern. I'll keep your time at 3 minutes per speaker. If the speaker will please state your name and address prior to your comments, I'll let the chairman know when your time is up.
My name is Joseph Cox. This is 1640 Ivy Road in Winterville, North Carolina, 28590. I'm currently up here to speak mainly about the way that some of the bid practices are going. I'm up here really to speak with y'all about the lawn care system that you have going on. Under the scope of work, it states that you must pick up all your paperwork from the county office, and it states that you're supposed to also use the county paperwork. It is in the scope of work. The only thing that I ask is when you're doing your decision for your bid on the lawn maintenance, that you go along with the scope, which is legal and binding. That's all I ask.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, that's all we have signed up, unless there's somebody else in the audience who'd like to come forward.
Anyone else in the audience like to speak? I hear none. We should proceed to items now for report. Woodmore Farm Subdivision, James Rose, please.
Good morning, Mr. McLawhorn, members of the board. We have an item for report this morning, and this is one that you're somewhat familiar with. We have gone through this process and procedure with an adjacent subdivision, which was Woodmore subdivision. This is Woodmore Farms, and this morning we're simply coming before you to get a little bit of guidance as to where we go with this, and specifically the method of funding this if we do move forward. So first up, we have our county attorney here. If you'd like to speak, have any specifics spoken to about the regulations that are set aside in the general statutes for handling these types of processes. And of course, we have our own policy that's included in your agenda package this morning, and we've had that in place for several years now. And again, had one subdivision development to come through for this assessment process. So the map in front of you is not a pretty one. This is one that we've been working on for quite a while. I'm working with the residents and the property owners within Woodmore Farms subdivision. This one is quite odd in that you've got a number of factors playing in, and this is all important as we make sure that we meet the statutory requirements for moving forward with this project. We do have an existing, the black line here shows an existing state-maintained road that pretty much goes into the heart of the development. So those lots that are shown in light blue will not be a party to this particular process. They already, those properties have frontage, sole frontage onto the state-maintained road. The other ones, those in beige color, those are ones that front onto the subdivision streets that are proposed for public maintenance, have not been turned over. And in this case, you may recall, this is the same developer that developed this Woodmore. He's now deceased, and in turn, there is no one available for maintaining these streets. So what we've got exactly 3/4, 75%. That's the magical threshold that the state statutes require for folks to move forward in this process. So those are shown in beige. The 13 properties that have not signed the petitions are shown in the hatch color, in the gold color. So you can see again, kind of a splattering of different colors, and this will indicate those that are moving forward or want to move forward with this process and those that don't. So not only do we look at the percentage of property owners, we also have to look at the lineal footage of the proposed public streets. And in this case, for those petitions that we've received to date, we have just over the magical 75% threshold there, right at 76% of the lineal footage that is included on those valid petitions. Those petitions have been checked and rechecked by our legal department to ensure there haven't been any ownership changes during this process. So, what we have to date too, our county engineer has been helpful in getting a cost estimate from the contractor that did the Woodmore property or project, and that we feel like in some respects holds a little bit more credence than the other one. So the higher one of the two that are shown currently is from the contractor that completed the Woodmore Drive project. The lower one is from another contractor. Currently, that contractor is not on the approved Department of Transportation contractor listing. So, of course, when we go through this bid process, we'll want to make sure that is worked out. So what does this mean? We've got 52 properties that would be included. Right now, we allow up to a 10-year repayment period. That's what we went along with Woodmore Drive. So based on those two cost estimates, this is your range that you could see on an annual basis between about $500, which is close to what we did with Woodmore Drive, up to about $1,300 if it is the higher, closer in line with the higher bid. And of course, this will go through a bid process, just like the one that you're dealing with today with the lawn care. So none of these will be known until after that bid process is completed. So these are just estimates at the time being. We'll go through that formal bid process a little bit later. So that gets us to hopefully some direction from the board this morning. Number one, we've got some funding left over from the Woodmore Drive project. That was in the general fund. Now there's a discussion about how to fund this upcoming project. We only used about half those funds. There are about $110,000 left in the general fund if we wanted to supplement it with that remaining process. Or we could also use some other funding mechanisms. The other part of this is the timing. When do we move forward? Of course, there's a preferred time that you would do this type of work, and we're moving into that part of the year right now. Usually any time from March on through about November of the year would be when you'd want to do that type of road work. So these are a couple of items we'd like to get some of your input about this morning before we move forward or put this on hold for a while. Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rowe. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our county manager for possible funding option and timing procedure.
Yes, sir. So the board really has the option to fund it out of fund balance like you did on the first project, which at this point in time, we as staff are not recommending that. What we are recommending is if you want to proceed forward on this, would be to do a bank loan, which is really probably what we should have done on the first one, so we're not dipping into fund balance. The current policy you adopted says that the board does not intend to charge interest on the assessment. The first project you did not. We would almost recommend to change the policy to say that the interest would be charged at whatever rate the bank would assess it. So if it's the high end or low end, go to the bank, get a loan, and then over the 10-year period that the assessments are paid back in, that would then make your debt payments on that loan. So we recommend moving forward, but A, we would need to change the policy, and B, we would need to do some research with banks in terms of I don't think it'd be a problem. We'd be pledging the taxing authority of the county to borrow the money.
Yes, Mr. Garrett?
I like that idea, Scott, rather than reducing fund balance, because that's one of the principles that I personally stated for myself as we went into this budgeting process, that we would not further reduce our fund balance. So, and then the proceeds, the payment that they would make each year would be enough to pay off the loan.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. But the question I had, James, is, didn't we get a third bid on Friday?
We did.
Now, the thing that really concerned me about those bids, you kind of talked about a little bit, was the wide range, because this bid on Friday was like right at 200,000. So we have a range of 200,000, 259, and 681. That is extremely significant difference, and I have no idea which one is the most credible. I prefer the lower one, but I want to make sure that they can do the job at that level.
Couple of things. Also, the bid from Friday, that particular contractor is not on DOT's contractors listing, preferred contractors listing. Again, whether they're able to be bonded is another question. That's why this process will be vetted through the bid and formal bidding process. And I would say, personally, I would believe the contractor that did the work on Woodmore Drive at this point would know better what needs to be done.
Well, I agree with that. So of the three bids we have, only one is approved by the state.
That is correct.
And that's the one at 681,000.
That is correct.
That is significantly higher than what we ventured out on the other project, because the other project ended up costing what?
It would be, well, per property owner, right at 5,000.
Yeah, but what was the total cost of it?
106,000 total.
106.
Lot shorter road segment than
I
ours, so
understand that, yeah.
not quite the same there.
Yeah.
And in terms of these bids, we as a county have not bid this project out, have not received any bids. The neighborhood has worked with different contractors to get, I would call them estimates. They're not bids, they're just estimates as to the probable cost of the work. But until a formal bid package is put on the street and then is responded to at the deadline, then you as a board receive those bids. We hope it's the low end of what's being projected, but we don't know if it's the low end or the high end of the two extremes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Ms. Cole.
being a civil engineer and having majored in road construction and bridge building, I have at least a little bit of knowledge of roads. The difference in cost could very well be that the higher bidder, that maybe not, because I haven't seen anything, but I don't know the details. The higher bidder may actually do some more work to the subbase, which is the most critical part of a road. If you try to just pave over whatever's there without truly repairing the subbase, you're going to get what they refer to as alligator cracking. In other words, you're paving over where it already looks like an alligator skin. And even if they put tar down over it and then just pave over it, they may just, it'll telescope through in a couple of years. The second thing is the amount of material they put on there. Being a member of the RPO, I brought up in one of our meetings that I was a little bit concerned of what they did on when they were paving some of the roads around Greenville. Have you noticed that some of these roads are already breaking up? Have you noticed how thick the but the asphalt is that goes on it? It's supposed to be 1.5 inches. It's nowhere near 1.5 inches. So it could be that this guy is going to repair, the higher price guy, is going to do a better job of repairing the subbase and then putting down a proper amount of asphalt on top. Now, that could also be why that higher bid is the one where the DOT is looking at and say, yeah, I like that better. Because when they adopt a road, now they're going to be responsible for it. And if they're not going to adopt a road if the subbase is compromised. Again, that's all speculation on my part.
Yeah, and I totally understand what you said, but when we put these bids out, aren't we going to say what the standards are and expect all three contractors to come back with the same criteria, the same standards?
Couple of items here. Number one, if you go back to the statutes, DOT is a partner in this process. So they have already gone out, have a punch list of sorts as to what road segment out there, what work needs to be done, sub-base work in some cases, a lot of drainage work on the side shoulders, and of course the overlay. So that is going to be part of the bid package. Each one of those items will have to be listed, and DOT, of course, is going to be out there monitoring, just like they did with Woodmore Drive, to ensure that everything's done. So that's the important part. And again, as Janice will confirm, it is very important that we get a bonded contractor in here just in case something doesn't work out quite right.
Okay, Commissioner Ward.
It's my understanding, I've not heard anything except happiness, if that's the right word, from the residents of our previous project like this. Am I correct with that? Everything is still going well and they are happy that
Has
that
been
happened.
adopted by DOT, yes.
And everything down the road. Say, I'd like them, because no bids have been brought forward to us. So I think the process should be for us to move forward with the plan to do what we did previously, to fund it by borrowing, with the interest being tacked on, which I think will be a small amount of money per month to the residents as approved with our plan for this, and move ahead, and when you'll bring back the bids to us, and then we can decide what we're going to do at that time. So that's my motion.
I
Does
second
that, does that include everything you need?
Yes, ma'am, and there, as you recognize, several steps in between that
Yes.
and what we have to do beforehand, so
I
yes, we will.
understand. Thank
Second
you.
it.
It has been moved and properly second, then that we move along with the recommendation that Commissioner Ward suggested. All in favor of that said motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
This time we should have Raymond Revere come up with the tax collection report.
I move that we approve this report.
Second.
Has been moved and properly second, and thank you very much for your report. Manager's report, Scott.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have, first item, happy to introduce,
Those
So we got to vote.
I'm sorry.
all in favor? Okay, all opposed? Motion carries.
Would ask Brian Barnett if he would come to the podium. I'm happy to introduce to the board Brian Barnett. I believe you all have met him. majority of you informally this morning, or maybe through the agenda preview last week. Brian started last Monday, March the 5th, and we are happy to have him at the helm of Deputy County Manager, Chief Financial Officer, and has big shoes to fill, obviously, with his predecessor, and has hit the ground running. Obviously, we are in the throes of the budget development for fiscal year 18-19, so we welcome Brian and welcome you.
Glad to be here.
Welcome, Brian. Anything you want to tell us about you?
Like Manager mentioned, I am looking forward to learning the budget process and moving us along. I know we have an abridged schedule, and we are working hard on it right now to try to keep the county in line, and especially looking at the fund balance. So we're ready to rock and roll.
Very good. Thank you.
Let's roll.
We're ready for you to rock and roll. Thank you very much. Manager's report at the time, Scott.
Okay, next item, item B, your next meeting dates. We have a second meeting on March 26th, which would be your fourth Monday. We're on a second and fourth versus first and third due to the NACO conference this month. That'll be at 6 p.m. the month of April, then on April the 9th. Item C, I think the board has received information regarding the summit that is going to be held in Guilford County, the Helping Our Children Thrive Summit. This is as an initiative of the new president of the North Carolina Association of Commissioners. This is a two-day summit, and I believe we have Commissioners Huggins and Perkins-Williams have expressed an interest to go to that. And if anybody else wants to go, let us know, and we'll be happy to arrange that. And that, along with, there's another event. There's a White House Summit that's going to occur this week on the 14th, of which county commissioners across the state of North Carolina have been invited to this summit exclusively for North Carolina county commissioners. I think we've polled the board, and Commissioner Perkins-Williams has expressed a desire to attend that. These two items would be an exception to your travel policy and would need your consent to spend funds on them, both the Helping Our Children Thrive Summit and the White House Summit. So if the board is in agreement to that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, do we have anyone that disagree with that? All in favor of that, let it be known by just raising your hand. It's a majority.
Okay. All right. Next, item D, the association's district meeting will be held in Craven County on April 4th from 5:30 to 8 p.m. We'll be polling the board to find out who would be interested in attending that with us as staff. Next item, the Candlewick Sewer Project. As you're aware, we're in the midst of implementing the CDBG project, Community Development Block Grant project for the Candlewick Sanitary District. And the county, with its consultant, McDavid & Associates, actually applied for a round 2 funding to hook up additional houses after the first project is done. And its first project will be done approximately in the month of June of this year, 2018. Unfortunately, our application in Raleigh before state officials did not receive enough points to be funded for a second round of funding, but it is thought that if we reapplied in 2019, that it could be considered and funded in 2019. So at this point in time, we will complete the initial work, hook up the homes that we have scheduled to be hooked up, and the main lines going into that neighborhood, the pump station, all that will be in place. It'll be ready to be expanded when and if additional funds are available. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that. Item F, Cooperative Extension has applied for an application through the Vidant Foundation for a Family and Consumer Service Food Nutrition Educator position. This is prior to this board meeting's deadline, and just asked me to announce that. And they have applied, I believe, for 100% funding on that. The next item, item G on the agenda, with Dwayne Holder leaving the county last fall, he used to serve on the Trillium Board, and they have a need for a person on the Central Regional Advisory Board, and we've identified Deborah Herring to serve in that capacity. And right now I know we have Commissioner Ann Huggins on there as well. She's on there as a chairman's appointee for that. From our research, from what we could tell, there's no need to have official board action on it, but did want to announce to you that Ms. Herring has, and she's the retired nursing director of Pitt County Health Department, has agreed to serve on there. Item H, we put a note on here for the NACO Legislative Conference that was held last week. Didn't know if any of the commissioners or staff wanted to make any comments in regard to attending. Anything you wanted to bring back and share?
I would like to, I wanted to share with the board the federal legislative priorities, because we do go to the state and get the states, and they have 8 priorities that would definitely interest you, and I have a strong interest in the promote county infrastructure priorities, because in a rural area, we're weak in that, and most of the programs that I attended, or the session that I attended, did have something to do with the infrastructure and poverty as it relates to the 7th one on here, support programs that assist counties to prevent and reduce poverty. And there was a lot of talk on the human services, and they also talked about regional emphasis as it relates to human services. It was a very interesting federal legislative conference, and exciting. It was different from the last time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. In my capacity as Vice Chair of the Transportation Steering Committee, Aviation Subcommittee, and a member of the Immigration Reform Task Force, I had the opportunity to speak on these subjects, and Janice Gallagher was at my side the whole time, a great aid to have the county attorney along with you. And at the airports subcommittee, we heard from the FAA, and they spoke about drones, and they went on to again re-verify that they are in fact encouraging counties to look to regulate errant drones at the most local lowest level. And on the Immigration Reform Task Force, we heard from everything from the gamut to people who really want any person who is here illegally ejected, to one person from Arizona that wanted to declare her county a sanctuary county. And later I'd like to have our sheriff comment on Pitt County's policy on being a sanctuary county or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. Anything, anybody else? I hear none at this time.
Few more items, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Report on the status of Pitt County's Board of Elections. If Dave Davis will come forward, I asked him just to come and make a brief report regarding the recent court ruling or judicial ruling regarding what Pitt County can and cannot do, as well as there's about 20 or 25 other counties that's in the same boat due to only having two board members on the Board of Elections.
That's correct. There was the change in the law to increase the board member size of the Board of Elections from 3 to 4, evenly divided between Democrat and Republican. What we are facing right now is a holdover because the State Board of Elections has not been appointed, and it's the State Board of Elections who appoints the local boards. So we're waiting on the courts to make all their rulings. We're waiting on the governor to appoint a state board, to in turn appoint local boards. What has happened recently is, with the law stating that the size of the local board to be 4, that means a quorum must be 3. Pitt County only has 2 members. Mr. Stewart resigned or stepped down last year, I believe in April, to take on the Republican Party chair. So for roughly a year now, getting close to a year, we've had just a 2-member board. Last summer, we were faced with not being able to meet for 2 months. Then there was a motion filed with the courts to allow what's now become basically a quarter of the state with only 2-member boards to still meet as long as both members are present and every decision is unanimous. With the recent rulings, that motion has dissolved, or that order has dissolved. So now we're back in the boat where our board cannot meet. Thankfully for this primary election, they've already taken care of everything as far as one stop, relocating the Greenville 10B polling place, Right now, we're only faced with in April when our absentee meetings, and then, of course, with the election itself, signing the official results. But I feel confident, based on the action that took place last year, that within the next few weeks, we will see a motion and an order issued allowing two-member boards to meet, considering a quarter of the state is in the same situation as us.
Okay. Any question? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, two other brief items. If the county attorney would just briefly tell us about the drone ordinance. We took it off this agenda, and maybe what the stance on that is, just.
Yes, so you had, just briefly, you had a drone ordinance that was removed from your agenda today. It was on for a second reading of an ordinance that had already received majority approval of the board, but not unanimous approval of the board. Within the last week, I received a phone call from Jonathan Cross, who is the chief counsel for the FAA, who requested, he affirmed that the local government has the authority to regulate the takeoff and landing of drones, and that he had no opposition to that type of an ordinance. However, the person that we had spoken with previously at the FAA, he did not agree with, who had reviewed our ordinance and gone over our ordinance with us. Jonathan Cross had a different opinion. And so we had relied upon a form ordinance from Orange County's California that had written material indicating that the FAA was in agreement with that form, or at least that the FAA found that that version did not raise preemption concerns. The current position of the FAA through their top general counsel person is that that is not the case. They do not support that Orange County's form as they had previously indicated they did. And so he has recommended and requested that in order to avoid challenge, that we not adopt the drone ordinance in its current version. And he has provided me feedback in other suggestions that if this were to go forward, that he would like to see. So what that means from this perspective going forward is that if the board so directed that a new ordinance would be prepared, it would come back, you'd have to have another public hearing, and you'd essentially pursue that way. But I do not recommend, as your counsel, giving the feedback from the FAA, that you continue on the path of a second reading for the version that you received. He was very apologetic and very humble in his conversation with me, and felt bad that we had been led down a different path by the FAA leading up to that point.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, one last item on the manager's report is the fiscal year 18-19 budget development. So we're looking at the July 1 budget process. We're well into the process. All of the departments have submitted their requests. We're looking at revenue projection. And in terms of the new year, I guess the best way to couch it, I have mixed reviews in terms of what we're looking at for the July 1 budget. In terms of growth in the tax base, we've got probably pretty identical growth to what we had last year. So under normal circumstances, we would have some room to do expansion in the new year. However, we've got a couple of challenges that are in front of us. One of those being that with the health department they have an annual Medicaid settlement, and the county had received a number of years back a settlement of about $700,000, which was higher than normal. The feds have came back and are telling us that they are going to seek reimbursement on a portion of that settlement. Initially, it was about $450,000. We negotiated that down to about $429,000. And we believe that by taking a further action, we can negotiate it down to about $350,000. But that will be that one item in and of itself will be a direct hit to fund balance. The other item we have is basically just an error in the estimation of prior year delinquent taxes, that when the budget was developed by myself and our former deputy manager over the finance department in terms of prior year taxes. We we have a business process in terms of how we book the monies was not modified when we changed over. It was part of dealing with TAG and tax. That could well in effect be a $1.9 million adjustment on the books as we enter the process. So basically, the growth we have in the budget through the growth in the tax base, through these and other items will probably be wiped out, per se. I've told the department heads in our department head meeting last night, we're going to go into this process with flat budgets, no growth, no positions, only things that are just an absolute necessary to be added. And then by the time we get to you in the budget workshops, we feel, in talking to Brian, we'll have a better feel for where we stand. Now, there are some revenues, such as within the detention center, the fed bed revenue, that's exceeding projections. We had brought that down to 35 inmates, and that's about $1 million a year in fed bed revenue. We're actually averaging 63 inmates over the past 8 months, and that will actually be not quite a doubling of what we expected, but some portion of it. Now, we've already dipped into that when we did about $300,000 for the HVAC units at the detention center, and there's an agenda item on here this morning to possibly look at $100,000 for share of some vehicle maintenance and fuel, but that's kind of where we stand. I kind of want the board to know where we're entering into this budget process as myself and Brian starts meeting with all the department heads, why we're driving things to a flat budget, and if things can be added, if we do find that there's revenues. And I think in talking to Brian this morning, he would like to come back on the 26th and have us lay out a full explanation as to how we see revenues projected through June 30th, as to whether they will be flat or if there's going to be any potential for, because obviously we're trying to preserve fund balance. We can't go into the July 1 budget knowing that we're going to expend more fund balance than we should. Obviously, the fund balance is the premises of how we then establish the New Year's budget. So wanted the board to be aware of that, especially if you heard from the department head saying the manager's redlining the entire budget, cutting out all requested positions and expansion. At this point, yes, but if there's the opportunity to add back once we get to you in the budget workshops, we'll have that opportunity.
Very good. Thank you, Scott. Items for consent.
Move
Motion
for
to
acceptance.
approve.
Second it.
Has been moved and properly second that we approve the items for consent. All in favor, let it be known by raising the right hand. Those opposed, ayes have it. Item for decision at this time, Tim Corritt.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. This first item is a request that came from our clerk of court, Sarah Beth Rhodes at the courthouse. These are some immediate furniture needs they need that have been identified. The actual cost of the furniture that's needed, which was included in your package, is just a little bit over $50,000. What we've chosen to do is ask them to identify the immediate needs. As I said, those immediate needs is about half of that total cost. So we are requesting that the $21,806 budget amendment be approved for purchase of furniture at this time, and the remaining funds needed be placed in the budget for next year. So any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Good.
Is this put on any kind of competitive bids? Because I only see one vendor mentioned.
Yeah, there were several vendors that were prices were identified from.
And she's also purchasing off state contract, which
That's
is
correct.
the lowest price.
This is these.
Yes, sir.
State contract.
And the reason that I have to mention this is because, you know, we all get these weekly brochures from a couple of office supply places here in town, and the prices I see on those brochures are less than what I'm seeing here. Now, I recognize that there may be a quality issue also.
Some of the items like chairs for the magistrates, which are chairs occupied 24/7, 7 days a week, those are probably a little more expensive than some of the chairs she's proposing to replace in other areas of the courthouse. But we've went over the list with her and feel like the cost.
Yeah, and these chairs have warranty periods, much longer warranty periods than, say, a box store that you would go and buy a chair at as well.
I just wanted to make sure that we were getting the best value for our money, or for the people's money. It's not our money.
Amen to that.
Any other comments? At the pleasure of the board.
Move approval. Second it.
Has been moved and properly second that we approve this item. Those in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed, ayes have it. Thank you. Budget amendment, Sheriff's Office, Randy Gentry. Come forward. don't look like Randy Gentry, Sheriff, but
Good morning.
welcome.
The vehicle, we're asking for $100,000 in additional vehicle maintenance. Our vehicle maintenance fund was slashed over $300,000 last year due to the expectations of new cars being purchased. However, the new cars were not, I was not given the green light to order the new cars till late October, November. We're just starting to receive those cars now. We've already spent the amount of money that was designated. This money will be basically just cover fuel costs and very minor expenses until next year's budget.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if I can make a comment. The sheriff and I talked about this, and he expressed a concern the last time he ordered cars that he had ordered those without the boards had yet approved them, and that was true. Cars were ordered a couple of years back. This time, though, I mean, the more I thought about this since our conversation, the board did approve these July 1, and you say the green light wasn't given, but technically the green light was given. The funds were appropriated in the budget. Last time, as I recall, the funds had not been appropriated. So technically, the cars could have been ordered, and you order your cars separate apart from how the county orders ours, because you have your own special process. At this point in time, we've talked, he's really up against the wall. He's spent 97% of the monies within this line item for maintenance and fuel. I see no other option other than to allow him to use these funds.
And also, one justification I think I read is that you have maintained more than normal the amount of federal inmates in the jail in terms of.
That's correct.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, basically, our day-to-day count is down, and so rather than just taking advantage of the count being down and having an easy day per se at work, we've been putting extra federal inmates in to fill our beds. Just as any good businessman would do at a motel, you want to fill your beds up. So we've been taking advantage of that. And I disagree with the manager. I was not given the green light to order those cars because y'all had to borrow the money, and you didn't borrow it until the end of October, November. I would have ordered them immediately, and chances, most of the time when I get a green light to order the cars where I had a disagreement with the board last time, I can get leftover year's cars that are sitting on the lot, ready to go the minute I make a phone call. So when we made the phone call in October, November, all those cars were gone. So we had to order new cars, wait for the manufacturer, and wait for them to be done.
One question I want to ask you, then I'll turn it over to the board. How much additional money did we generate in terms of the extra federal inmates that we had
This year?
this year?
Jeff, can you give me an accurate figure on that? I know he's got a projection of what we're going to see, and it's going to be.
Commissioner McLaughlin, if we stay on projected path for the next 4 months during this fiscal budget year that we're currently in, we're looking at $750,000 over.
$750,000?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Very good. So that would in fact help in terms of our fund balance without having to.
Right. We'll be taking that into account in the overall big picture, and we appreciate every effort the detention center and sheriff's office makes to house more fed beds than we need to.
I would like to take this time to thank my staff. My staff is the ones that put up the gentlemen that we have to take in. Majority are males, and they do an exceptional job when they're asked to do so.
Thank you.
I do want to note that, again, we 1,000% appreciate the efforts of detention center, sheriff, and all the staff, but do want to point out that I think the overall budget detention center is $10 million maybe?
I don't know.
Plus or minus.
It's close.
But just keep in mind, this revenue brings in, as budgeted at 35 inmates, brings in $1 million. So, I mean, yes, these are funds above and beyond what we have budgeted, but they're not above and beyond the overall cost of the center. But we do appreciate every effort you make to bring the additional revenue in.
Well, and just to recap, you know, we were doing 65, we were doing 80 at one time, but as our general population increases, we're fighting maximum capacity. And then when we start talking maximum capacity, we're talking about opening a new wing up. So working with the board and the manager in the past, we've decided to lower our federal count to not exceed with our daily population. But after we made that decision, actually, our daily population has dropped. So, and it's dropped down to average 435 at times. So rather than sitting there, we're trying to get back closer to that number of 500, because that's what we're equipped for, and that's what we're paying medical for, and that's what we're paying. Basically, it costs us a meal, a tray of food, and, you know, whatever health issues they may have. And the feds pay for all their health issues, so we don't have really concern with that. So it's a great opportunity. We've just been taking advantage of it, and it could stop tomorrow. So we don't, like the manager said, we don't really need to count on this. If we get it, it's extra. You know, it's nothing I really would feel comfortable budgeting in the future for this money right now.
Okay. Commissioner Wood?
I think Commissioner
Yes, Mr. Chairman,
was first.
I just wanted to say, first of all, I do appreciate your hard work on the federal prisoners. That is a major benefit to this county, and we appreciate you doing that.
Thank you.
I am concerned, though, about the misunderstanding or the miscommunication relative to when you could buy the cars. I thought once we approved the budget that you could go out. In fact, I was expecting you to order those cars on the 2nd of July because I know you've been emphasizing how bad the cars were. And I was very surprised when I saw in here that it was November before these cars were ordered. And then the other thing that concerns me is if you order them in November, it takes 5 or 6 months to get those cars?
We just started getting them probably the 1st of January, and they're drop shipped to a upfitter. And the upfitter has to work them. We've got priority. We're in front of the line. We're doing 3 cars a week. It takes him a week to do 3 cars. He's doing those, and then when we get those, we had to carry them to the sign. The person that does the markings on the side of the vehicle. So yeah, because the cars were made brand new. In the past, what we've been able to do, like I said, if I'd have gotten the green light in July, I would have called the Sheriff's Association and say, has anybody got any leftover cars sitting there? We're in the car dealerships, and generally they have 20 or 30. And in the past, we usually would go ahead and grab 10 right then, and then order next year's cars. But you know, that was the deal. I know y'all had to borrow the money. It was a payback thing, and when I got the green light to order them, it was.
And I guess from my perspective, from this side of the fence of the equation, in my mind, I thought since the budget was approved, they were put in there. Technically, you could have went ahead and bought them. We could have done a reimbursement resolution and then reimbursed our monies through the bank loan. I don't know if it was partly because the position was vacant. Obviously, we had Chris in there as an interim. So I
did that one year, and Mr. Colson didn't like the idea that I had ordered them early, so without getting.
Anyway, it is what it is. I don't fully understand that, but it is what it is, and I know you need vehicles. How much of this money, it says maintenance and gas, how much is for gas and how much?
We're averaging between 18 and 20,000 a
gas
month.
Gas is 18 to 20.
Mm-hmm. And it depends on where the market stays.
I really hate to spend $80,000 on maintaining wore-out cars because $80,000 could have purchased another 3 cars.
I agree. But what we're doing, nothing's being fixed unless the fleet manager personally contacts me, and we are just nitpicking any little repair right now to make us get through the year. And the ones that we're snatching off the line and replacing with new vehicles is the worst of the worst. So they're being gone, and you've noticed a lot of here, we're selling a lot of cars right now.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So I'm troubled like Jimmy is. As you're saying you're waiting for a green light.
Mhm.
I think most of us, if not all of us on the board, thought that we had approved it and you had the green light July the 1st. What made you think you didn't get a green light until November? Are you waiting for the county manager to
Yes.
come back and say?
Now, I've asked him when could I order them.
When did you ask
When can we
him?
order them? July 1st.
Scott?
I don't recall that. I'm not going to say he didn't, but I don't recall that. Chris, do you recall any formal requests coming in to order the vehicles?
One thing too, you had the business officer at the sheriff's department vacant as well in that time frame. I think we were trying to get we didn't have a business officer in the sheriff's department.
Yes, you did. You had the sheriff. As far as I'm concerned, you got an absence in your department, and it's a critical thing, then you need to be taking over that duty.
I did.
I'm troubled with this, that you're coming up now, 3 months, left in a year, asking for $100,000, when vehicles that have been authorized to be bought haven't been bought. Okay, so then hypothetically, I would say that if we don't do this, there's gonna be some kind of effect. What would the effect be if we don't approve this? Are you gonna have less cars on the road, less deputies doing their job, or what?
All of the above, yes, sir.
How many?
Well, I ain't got no money to buy gas with, so I'm gonna have to figure out what can I absorb and where am I gonna get the money from.
You don't have any other funds anywhere else that could be shifted?
No.
Well, there are technically lapsed salaries within the overall budget. I think we had looked at the sheriff's office budget by year end June 30th, and how much do you normally return to general fund in sheriff's office?
Very little.
Scott?
Got a lap salary. I usually don't have control of that because that's what y'all have decided goes back to fund certain projects you had or something.
So Scott, from your perspective, were you waiting, are you waiting to authorize expenses, not just to the sheriff, but maybe other departments, in a budget that we'd already approved? Are there other examples of this somewhere else? I mean, I'm just troubled by that.
Like I was mentioning earlier, we can do a reimbursement resolution on any project.
Did he know that?
I don't think so.
Did you share that with him? Well, now
Yeah.
lessons learned. I got a hard time voting for $100,000 this late in the year. And we're saying that we don't have any other monies that can be shifted other than using fund balance.
When you look at the amount that we agreed to, it gave me like $440,000. Ever since I've been the sheriff, we've always operated at least $650,000 to $750,000 a year in vehicle maintenance. This program would have worked if I could have ordered cars day one.
But
It's
I'm
my
going
word
to
against it. I'm
suggest
telling you, I wouldn't give
could
them the
have
green
ordered
light to
the
order
car.
them.
I'm going to suggest, based on what I'm hearing, you could have ordered those cars. You could have
No,
been
could
very
not.
forceful and brought it back to the board. Give me a call. Give Jimmy a call. Give Beth a call. You could have on July the 3rd, when you felt like there was a problem, start petitioning us and let us then help
Well, I
you
was told
early
y'all were gonna
rather
take,
than.
did y'all not take out a loan for this process is? Can you take out a loan you're gonna pay back for 3 years, and the reduction of the vehicle money by $350,000 would pay that loan back? That's what I was told.
Yes, that loan was taken out.
But we do that all the time, don't we?
Yes.
I mean, in other projects.
And again, I guess in a perfect world, if your business officer and our deputy manager had been in place, maybe it would have happened more efficiently.
I'm not gonna buy that excuse. I mean, I was ready to buy them.
I could be mistaken, but I don't recall you, maybe you can produce an email or something to say you made the formal request, but I
Well,
don't
I
recall
don't
it.
really intend to instigate an argument between the two of you, but Scott, you're saying that you're recommending the approval of that.
Well, I basically asked the sheriff, I said, what if we don't approve? What if you as the board do not approve? And basically, the sheriff said he might have to park some vehicles and only answer emergency calls. So I figured, well, if that's the case, then I felt I was backed up against a wall that, yeah, I needed to recommend this.
Before you, Commissioner, Scott, do you have any secondary recommendation in terms of partly funding rather than total funding? It sounds to me that there's been a total miscommunication, that the sheriff department was thinking that he was waiting for you to give him the okay, and apparently, according to him, that okay was not given. Now, I don't know as to whether it was not or not.
Well, I'll say out of a $246 million budget with whether it's cars, building supplies, personnel, I don't wait for departments necessarily to come to me to ask for the permission to spend
That's what I was about to ask.
almost $250 million worth of expenditures.
That's what I was about to ask. Once the budget is passed and the department have their budget allocations, I thought they then become in charge of managing it and doing it. So if it's otherwise, then I need to go back to that fiscal training thing.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, so we're getting ready to go into a new budget process. We come up with a budget. You're still sheriff July 1st.
Yes, sir.
Are you going to ask Scott on July 1st? Or are you going to wait until the next March
Well, I'll
on
be
some
honest
other
with you, I'd like
issue?
some direction from y'all, because I am totally confused, because I did that one year, and I got in trouble, and I was told I couldn't buy cars until I was told to, so
You
I
couldn't buy
learned from my
cars
mistake.
Unless they were approved. As I remember, it was a mistake that was made by the sheriff's department. And your individual came up, I can't remember her name, but anyway, she came up and she admitted that she goofed. She made the mistake. And
Well, I will really work hard to try to find you an email telling me that. And I'll look to my chief and see. I know we were notified that we can now order the cars. I don't know if that's through the man that runs the landfill that handles the cars, or Scott Elliott.
We don't order your cars. He handles all the purchases.
The green light to purchase the cars. I would have been tickled to death to order them on July 1st. I promise you, we asked every day about it. I mean, y'all gonna try to kick me on the bus, that's fine. I know what the deal is. I think it's a ridiculous amount that we got $444,000 to start with. I didn't think it would work. We're already $10,000 over right now. And when you asked me what could I use, I threw out a figure 100,000, figuring $20,000 a month, and we're gonna be scrambling to make that. So anything over the 100, I'll have to absorb it in my budget.
well, like I said, this should be a lesson learned.
Commissioner Warren. Okay, I'm sorry.
Looking at some correspondence from Dwayne Holder, he was saying that the sheriff's office was not told to hold off on ordering the vehicles. He's saying nothing was communicated from his office prior to his leaving, and that he said they have initiated ordering in the past with no problem. That's straight from Dwayne Holder.
Okay. Commissioner Warren and then Commissioner Huggins.
Having served as an administrator using county money, state money, federal money, and local money, once you get your budget, you're just so excited because, and it's not always what you want, but it's what you got for the year coming. And most of the time, you already have your plans in place as to how that money's going to be spent, or you wouldn't have a budget in the first place. At the end of, we allotted enough money to purchase 43 cars last year. And that was because it needed to be done. There was an urgency, as I remember it, related to us during budget time. I'd never have known that we had, I don't think it was our mistake that the cars were ordered before the money was there last time or whenever it happened. And I remembered exactly like you do, Mr. Colson. I can't remember the lady's name who was doing the finances.
Ms. Preston.
But
That's right.
she came forward to say that the office moved on it ahead of time and they should not have. And it really was not even close to similar to this case. My understanding, and so I don't think we can compare that to now. We allotted enough money to purchase 43 cars, and at this time, only 9 cars have been purchased.
No, ma'am. All of them have been purchased. 9
But I
have been
meant-
put in service on the road today. And we should have 3 more by the end by Friday.
Okay, I had understood that only 9 cars at the time of the request had been. So, it just bothers me. I feel like that we have been over backwards, and I think you all, I don't remember how many years ago, but the Sheriff's Department received the top allotment from our budget, from the county budget, and you've been at number 2 or number 3 in the budget because you are one of our priorities, the safety of our citizens. I feel like that this is not our problem. I feel really strongly about this, and I don't know where the money is, but if you've ordered all the cars, I feel like, I hope that you will be able to find enough money to keep those cars running that you have, wherever the money's gonna come from with the money you've got in. But anyway, that's just my statement. I'm not asking you to turn and say, do we have that money available? But I feel like that we did bend over backwards as a county and as a group of commissioners to support our deputies by allotting 43 cars, and that was the most I can remember since I've been on here in 1 year. So I feel just like you do, Mr. Colson.
Commissioner Hudson.
In listening to the sheriff and listening to other commissioners, I feel like that we're in a situation where somebody dropped the ball, and it looks like on both ends, the sheriff's department and maybe our department. And when I say our department, whether it's the county manager's office, but we've asked the sheriff how to remedy this should we not pass this, and he told us. So we've heard that. So now the ball is in our court. Where do we go from here with the mistakes that have been made? I don't think we want the sheriff to not answer calls. I don't think we want him to park the vehicles. I don't think we want him to maybe let some employees go. I don't know, he didn't say that. But taking all of that in consideration, and that we feel uncomfortable with what he is saying needs to happen there, whether he ordered the cars or didn't get the green light, we're now at a point where we have to make a decision. So I'm going to make a motion that we give the sheriff what he's asking for at this point, and this will be a learning lesson to us. So that's just my suggestion, my motion.
Mr. Chairman, I do agree with Ann. Regrettably, I will second her motion for a vote.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
allowing discussion on this at this point, since there's been a vote in a second. I do not want to see public safety sacrificed. As much as I don't want to vote for this, I feel like we at this point have no choice but to vote for it. And therefore, I agree with Ann on this.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I asked the question if there was any money, towards this. Instead of, that money's gonna come out of our fund balance. When I feel I can take this and I can vote for it, if part of the money that's coming into our fund balance from the federal prisoners, we earmark that money and not actually get into the fund balance as it presently sits.
But it's really 6 1/2 dozen.
I know it is. It'll go in there and then we'll have to take it out. But that will make me feel better, because I don't think we're using our taxpayers' money appropriately. And I do not blame this office at all for the way things happened, because it followed all the guidelines and everybody that was involved. I don't know of any other department that doesn't start spending money July the 2nd. So anyway, that's how I can vote for it, and for no other reason.
Is that a substitute motion?
Well, it won't matter, because it's still gonna come out of fund balance, because we don't have it.
I understand, but it's technical.
Okay, technically, I will, if
you
you will take that money out of the money that they put in there, that'll make me feel better, those actual dollars.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. What is going to prevent this from happening again, because we were sort of like this last year with the young lady sitting. What is going to prevent this from happening again?
Well, the prior year, we had a situation where they purchased vehicles without any board knowledge or
Right.
approval at all, so it's entirely different. The difference is there wasn't a business officer in the department. Donna Preston would have July 1, I feel if she'd been in that position, would have went forward immediately. But I don't think we're going to have a position where we can order $1.1 million worth of vehicles like we've had this year again. We're going to be back to our normal vehicle, $650,000 over all departments going forward, unless there's a huge infusion of money I'm not aware of for vehicles.
Okay. All right.
Okay, let's go.
We,
Call for the question.
we do have a motion that's, did you have
Call for
something you
what,
wanted?
please?
Did you have something you wanted?
Agree with the motion. I'll
We
make
do
a
have
comment
a
at the end.
motion and second that we go along and approve this request. Those of you who are in favor of said motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. And I will bring back a report to you guys. My vehicle maintenance guy's on the way to Raleigh to pick up 3 cars right now. But he has got emails where I was specifically asked who's going to get the cars, where they were going, and when we had the green light to order the cars. So I will report that back. I'm not going to take the rap for something I know I inspect the office of the sheriff.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Tim.
Good morning again. So this is our, the next step in our animal shelter expansion and renovation project. As directed by the board, we moved forward with bidding the project. The project was advertised in the Daily Drum and the Daily Reflector. Bids were opened on February 20th. We received 6 bids, 5 of which were responsive. Those companies which bid are indicated in your package. The low bidder for the base bid was Bernie & Bernie, who is a Pitt County contractor, also a minority firm. Their total base bid was $1.62 million. As we stated to you how the project will be bid, we bid 9 alternates as part of the project. Those were parts of the project which were indicated not only by staff at the animal shelter, but also by the state, who comes and inspects regularly. So these are items that were identified as needing maintenance or replacement. We are recommending 6 of these alternates to be part of the project. The total of those alternates is $234,000, bringing the total cost of the project to $1.854 million. We'd also like to include a $74,000 contingency, making the grand total $1.928 million. This, along with the costs for the architect as well as other related costs to the project, should put us right on budget for the $2.15 million, which was identified for the project. Due to the nature of the bids, staff did meet with Bernie & Bernie, the low bidder, just to reaffirm their bid. They did provide an email that reaffirmed their pricing, as well as asked for an extension on time. Staff is not as concerned about time. We want to make sure that they have ample time to do the project. They've asked for an additional 60 days. So the total time on the project would come to 360 days, which falls in line with most of the other bidders on the project. So we're asking for approval of the contract with Bernie & Bernie for the animal shelter expansion and renovation project. Any questions? I'll be happy to answer them.
Questions?
Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Going back to a couple of meetings ago when we were talking about bidding processes and all things being equal, how do I know that the low bidder, like on the electrical, $84,000, and the high bidder was $175,000? I mean, we're talking $90,000 difference. Are you going to get the same quality? You're going to get the same everything?
All the material is specified in the contract, so everything within the specifications will have to be met, whether it's the workmanship or the actual material. So
and you've compared them line item by
they have
line item?
that was part of our meeting with them, is some of those same concerns, and they have
You bet your
assured us.
job on this? Tim, I'm just kidding. No, all right, thank you.
We also had the jail architect, Bill Daggett, on in conference call
that call
with
as well,
in our meeting with Bernie and Bernie, he was questioning those different aspects of the bid as well to get assurance, because ultimately, it's our responsibility, but as the architect who inspects the job too, it's his responsibility as well.
That's right. And he'll be the one that identifies and approves all the specifications for all the materials and everything that's submitted. So we've talked about those exact items with the contractor.
And when you did that, was Michelle part of the conversation?
Michelle has been with us hand in hand on this project.
Okay, good. Glad to hear that.
Okay. Yes, sir.
The thing that was a little confusing to me about the way this was laid out, I didn't understand what the alternates were. The alternates are improvements on the current facilities.
Correct. Mainly those identified that Michelle gets dinged on by the state as far as issues on their inspection, things that need to be addressed, that need to be addressed so that the inspection can continue to pass.
Okay. But I don't know what they are, but you know what they are, so.
Yeah, and I can go through those if you'd like to know which ones.
The other question I had was, does this total bid, that does include the $178,000 site work?
Yes.
Okay.
That is in the base bid, correct.
Okay.
Well,
Any question? What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve?
I second that
Has been moved
motion.
and properly second that we approve this request. Those in favor of the said motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Mac Rogers at this time for the lawn care and maintenance service.
We need to. Trust me, we need to.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning.
I'm assuming you have your request for proposals in front of you.
Yeah, the board will reference the bid tabulation, the chart that looks like this, we place in front of you. That's what Mr. Rogers is referring to.
We are looking at bidding out our entire ground maintenance operation, and we put this out for bid to actually about 7 contractors, but we had 5 that responded back to us. We went over this. There was 5 of us that went over this. It was very subjective. It was very paper heavy. We went and tried to be as fair as we could, being able to compare apples to apples, and the results are what you have before you.
And if I can elaborate with you, Mike, so you have 3 campuses that are designated in the left-hand column. The north campus is the area, what we call the Office Park north of the river, basically. The main campus is this campus we're sitting on here and all of its grounds. Then the downtown campus, all the different downtown sites. The 4th area that is not designated is the district park area, and that's currently under contract, and we'll be looking at bidding that out a year from now as we enter into the budget process coming forward. But so for the north campus, going to across the table to the right, you see that the 5 entities that have bid on it, highlighted. 3rd Street at $91,660 is being recommended for the north campus. For main campus, again, 3rd Street at $23,950 is being recommended. Then the downtown campus in the far right-hand column, under BT Carawan, $31,795 would be the 3 low bid recommendations. And these were thoroughly went over by Mike, legal. I was partly involved in the process. I think Community, Schools, Recreation even had planning had a hand in it. Any others?
Buildings and grounds.
Okay, buildings and grounds. And these, BT Carawan is a local lawn maintenance?
He's out of Goldsboro, I believe.
Goldsboro, okay. And obviously 3rd Street is the 3rd Street entity.
Over on 3rd.
I move that we approve those 3 because they certainly are the lowest, and that's what we need to approve.
Okay.
I second it.
Has been moved and properly second that we approve those 3 being the lowest bids. And you did say these lowest bids also will be, this lowest bid would be doing the same amount of work that was required. It seems to me that it's a big difference in,
I agree,
in terms of.
and that question came up, so there was some clarification, and we called that individual on Mr. Carawan to confirm his bid, and we did it just like we did everybody else.
Okay.
And we do have, in terms of the north campus, in terms of the price, we do have a baseline on that because that is currently contracted out right now. So that price has not totally unreasonable to what we're paying now, and actually what we specified in the RFP was services above and beyond what we're doing now.
Correct.
So with what increase that is, it's not out of line.
Correct.
Well, Mr. Chairman, is this an all or none? If you look at BT Carowin and downtown, they're actually lower price than Third Street. Can it be split?
Yeah,
We split it.
Yeah,
That was
we're
the
recommending
motion.
it to be split.
Oh, okay.
BT Carowin for the downtown.
I guess I
and
didn't understand.
Third Street for North and Main.
Okay.
Okay. It has been moved and properly second.
Yes.
It has been moved and properly second that we approve, I think, of Third Street.
Thank you.
Those in favor of the said motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Just to do it.
This time we have Scott as far as the recommendation of portrait.
Yes, you have a portrait request. We received a letter from the Senior Resident Superior Court Judge Marvin Blunt and the Chief District Court Judge Galen Brady requesting approval to invite the families of David Leach, former Chief District Court Judge, and Gwen Hilburn, the current Chief District Court Judge, to present a portrait for display in the courthouse. And there was actually a retirement celebration for Judge Hilburn that happened the week before last. And in speaking with Chairman Owens, we issued a letter basically saying that the board would consider this request today on March the 12th, and that based upon past action, we would anticipate that you'd probably do the same. No guarantee, but just saying we anticipated that the board probably would approve that request.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and properly second that we approve this. All in favor of the said motion, raise your right hand. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. This time, we should move down to item number 7, reappointment of the PC Nursing Home and Adult Care Advisory Board.
Mr.
Scott.
Chairman, I move for reappointment of Calvin Henderson and Everett Branch, and the appointments of Jack Brock and Gloria Brewington, I know you better person, to the PC Nursing Home Health Care.
Second.
Has been moved properly second that we appoint said names. Those in favor of the said motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed, motion carries. All right, at this time, appointment of the Animal Service Advisory Board. Scott.
Yes, there's a recommendation to appoint Dr. Lauren Mercer Hopkins to replace the former veterinarian on the board. And
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we appoint said name. Those in favor of the said motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed, motion carries. Reappointment to the Fire District Commission. Scott.
yes, on that one, you have within the abstract, you have a memo attached that outlines within all the fire district commissions the recommendations of individuals as outlined. I can read this off, or if the board would just like to have those as referenced in the abstract, it's multiple names.
I'd like to move that we accept the recommendation of these fire chiefs.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we accept the recommendation of said names. Those in favor of the motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed, motion carries. Reappointment to the Local Fireman Relief Fund Board. Scott.
Okay, this is similar to the last one. On the Local Firemen's Relief Board, you have individuals who will serve a 2-year term, and this one you have folks from Sharp Point, Impactolis, Brian Owens, Jimmy Letchworth, Roger Simmons, and Jerry Mizzle.
Motion to approve.
I second.
Motion to approve, second. All in favor of the said motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed, motion carries. At this time, Madam Attorney, if she will take us to closed session.
Yes, it has been suggested that this board go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3, pursuant to attorney-client privilege, A4, to discuss matters relating to economic development, and A1, to prevent the disclosure of confidential information. If you will move, we can proceed.
Motion to go into closed session.
Okay, it has been moved and properly second that we go into the closed session. Those in favor of said motion, raise your right hand. Those opposed? We're now into closed session.
I like to see the day that, when the media doesn't, you know where to go.
We're now back into open session. Commissioner Ward, you have something to?
I'd like to move for approval of the closed session minutes from February the 19th.
Second.
As we're moving, probably second, that we accept the closed session meeting of February 19th. All in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand. All opposed? Ayes have it. Commissioner
Chairman,
Garrity.
I would also like to make a motion that we amend the authority to represent with McHugh Fuller Law Group.
I second.
As we move in properly second, that we amend the, read that again?
Authority to represent.
Authority to represent. Those in favor say his motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed? Motion carries. At this time, we do have commissioner comments. We'll start now with Commissioner Cosa.
Mr. Chairman, one of the things that we've all been struck with year after year are these mass shootings in areas that we call no-gun zones. I will not name any of the people that have done it because I don't think we need to turn them into something more than what they are, which is criminals. It's society today. If you look at the uproar, I can summarize it as it seems to be a bunch of criminals, communists, and ungrateful children that create all our problems. But not the children in school. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the attitude, the disrespect for law enforcement, and so on. Now, I asked Janice a question. By no means am I a lawyer, but I do read a little bit. And years ago, I had heard of a thing called exigent circumstances. And I asked Janice, I said, is this legal in North Carolina, and what could it be used in Pitt County? And she came back and said, yes, it is. And basically what it is allowing for a warrantless, arrest or whatever of a citizen. Now, where it could potentially be used is, take the incident down in Florida, for instance. He telegraphed on social media his actions in school just time after time with law enforcement. They said the sheriff's department brought him in like 19 times. This potentially could have been something that could have been used to deny him guns. Might have even been able to deny him a knife more than 3.5 inches long or something. Now, I understand that this is a law that potentially could be abused, but it could have been exercised. They could have done something with this guy. And if we look at so many incidents around the country where things happen, is social media has been an outlet for these people to get on there and telegraph their intentions. So if there's an imminent threat to society, and that's where this exigent circumstances comes in, if it's perceived as an imminent threat, that's when it can be executed. So what I would like to do is recommend that this board consider very strongly, in fact, I'm going to make a motion and see if you'll get a second, that we try to have a joint meeting with the school board and law enforcement. And when I say law enforcement, I'm talking about the sheriff, the police, maybe even the highway patrol, others that I can't, just don't jump into my mind right now, into an open, honest debate as to what can we do as a community. And don't tell me, oh, let's take all the guns away, because that's not going to stop somebody that wants to do this from ever getting a gun.
That's right.
I have a daughter that's a teacher. I'm a pretty good shot. She's better than me. She is one of those that would be willing to carry a gun. I asked her, I said, Ingrid, would you be willing to do this if it was permissible for you as a teacher to, potentially be some mechanism to guard your students? And she said, well, Daddy, I don't want every teacher carrying a gun. I said, well, neither do I. I do not want that. In fact, I don't know anybody that does. But those that are so equipped. And I asked her, I said, well, what would you like to see done? She said, Daddy, if that ever happened, there are a couple of things I think would need to happen. And she said, I've thought about this a lot. She said, I think there ought to be quarterly times where you got to go requalify with your weapon. You got to demonstrate that you know how to use them properly, and that you continue to know what the laws are that, you know, prevent you from, you know, using it improperly. And through that examination, then a select few number of people or staff could actually be armed on school campus. She said, but don't broadcast it. She said, I don't want anybody to know that I'm one of those people, because I'll be the first target. The thing is, if we have this joint meeting, and if we truly have an open and honest debate, I think there are things that we can do to protect our schools, to harden them, or at least make them to be not so defenseless. So with that being said, and I could go on, drone on for a long time.
Please don't.
I won't. I'd like to make a motion that we ask staff or ask Scott to go to the school board first and see if they're even interested in having this joint meeting. And I think it ought to be outside of the budget time, but have this joint discussion and to think about, okay, what law enforcement could we bring in? And does this even make sense? If it doesn't make sense, then please don't second it. If it does make sense, please somebody do.
I will.
And then maybe we'll see what the commissioners as a whole would believe. So I do make that motion.
I will second it because I had discussions with Alan Everett when he was doing his first responder thing, and he indicated that what you're proposing is not out of line at all.
Okay, any other discussion with that? It has been moved and properly second that we, if I hear your motion, it's to have a joint meeting. Then the recommendation of that would come from the joint meeting in terms of what we do. You know, personally, I just want to say I do have a little problem with arming our teachers. I think the teachers are just there, should be there for educating purposes. And when you get into, I was a former firearms instructor for probation and parole, and it is some extreme, very extreme circumstances that these teachers or individual other than teacher has to go through in terms of, and to have teachers armed with firearms, to me, that's just putting a burden on them that I think that would even with some just extreme circumstances would be problematic to me. But I do agree with some of the recommendation that if we can get law enforcement and our school board together and sort of kind of iron out these situations and see what their recommendation would be.
Mr. Chairman, I fully appreciate that, but there was a number of staff down in Florida that sacrificed their lives trying to protect their students. And the only thing that they had to protect their students was their bodies. There is one laying in critical condition right now, having been shot in the back and multiple times elsewhere, that may not survive. He may still be a casualty of this. What did he do? He threw himself in front of the bullets that were meant to kill children. If he had been one of those that was so armed, and I'm not talking about somebody out there that doesn't know how to use a gun. There are people on this commission, quite frankly, I don't want you to have a gun, because I don't know that you would react in the situation in a proper manner. And I don't mean that as an insult, and I don't think that that's calling you a coward. That's not the intent there either. Some people are totally against it. Some are afraid of them. But if that coach had been one of those, could he have stopped it before 15 others were killed afterwards? I think it's quite likely.
Okay. Has been moved and properly second that we do bring this to the attention of our school board and law enforcement. Those in favor of
this is a request for us to have a joint meeting with the school board.
That is correct. That's all.
School board and law enforcement.
You didn't have that in his
Yes,
motion.
it
Okay, in
To
his motion.
check with them to see if they're interested.
Yes.
They are interested.
Yeah, if they're not interested, there's no use in discussing it at all.
All in favor of said motion to check and to investigate that from our county manager. All in favor of said motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed. Motion carries.
Okay, you got a comment?
Come on.
that motion takes my comment. But in addition to that, I like to say to parents of children in school and to grandparents or any guardian to children in school, I see it as a need for you to have a discussion with your children or the child that you are guardian of or you oversee. Just talk with them, then sometime you may find out something that you would need to take action on. I think there should be a time that you set aside to have an honest and open talk with your child without preconceived conclusions, so that the child feel comfortable to talk with you. Take that responsibility. Then maybe some things can perhaps be prevented. We need to talk with our young children a little more, and the older ones too. But I think that would be incumbent of you to do so as a guardian or a leader of your families.
Ms. Ward?
I really didn't have a comment, but I do have one now. The comment that was made that do not take the guns away, no one is advocating that I know of. There is discussion not to allow anyone to be able to buy an assault weapon. And I just think that is an easy thing to pass, and everybody can have every other kind of gun they want to buy or purchase. But that's just my thought. Go.
Okay, very good. I agree with you. Assault weapons of mass destruction is certainly an avenue that we should certainly be very careful. Recommend that no one carry an assault weapon. I cannot support an AR-15 weapon being carried. Bump stops, those should be banned. So these are something that I think that we certainly should, and I think law enforcement will see that is certainly problematic with our in our schools, especially with the teachers.
I agree. And AR-15s are very difficult to conceal. Jimmy?
I don't have any comment, but I have a question directed to our finance director. Now that you've seen us in action, you want to reconsider?
Touche.
I want to, I'm like Beth, I didn't have a comment. Well, I did have a comment, but I do want to speak to the gun thing. I totally agree with the meeting, and what come out of the meeting will be what we, I think we would hope that that we will come up with something that we can use here in Pitt County. I am not in support of arming teachers because there are just so many things that could happen, even with the teachers being trained very well how to use the weapons. My mind goes back to the law. What state is it that was stand your ground? Stand your ground. Yeah. So so what could happen in that classroom with that teacher being armed really raises a lot of questions for me. So I am totally in agreement with having the meeting with the Board of Education, because that is the agency that should be looking at policy for that. On another note, I want to say that March is Women's History Month, and I would like to recognize all women for doing this month of Women's History Month.
You're making history now.
Great. All right.
We're done?
I have a motion for
I say move.
Move was improperly second that we adjourn. All in favor of said motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. Those opposed. We're now adjourned.